if you have a pretty decent lens. And this is the 24 to 105 L lens on here, which isn't even the biggest of Canon's, you know, mid-range zoom lenses right here. Serious camera. There it is. Now Sony knows that there are two buyers for what was called the Alpha NEX line and now is just the Alpha A5000, a6000 series. They know that folks buy these who are looking for a step-up camera. They had a point and shoot. They want something better than what their pretty decent smartphone can shoot. So they start looking at something like this. Well, then there's the other type of person who's more like the type of person that I am, and I bet a bunch of you are too. You're pretty enthusiastic about photography. You probably have a full-size digital SLR, whether it's an APS-C size sensor or it's a full frame, but that thing is just awful big and heavy on vacations. Again, like I said, if you want to do subtle street photography and not have everybody notice you, you carry this around, especially with Sony's relatively newer compact 16 to 50 millimeter zoom lens right here. It's a powered zoom, by the way, and nobody's even going to notice that. And it's so light. Well, the body weighs 12.1 ounces. That's with a SD card, or you could put a memory stick in here, and with the battery inside. So really light, and obviously this lens, you can tell just from the size alone, no matter how high quality it was, it couldn't possibly be that heavy, but this is the kit zoom, so you're looking at a combination of mostly plastic, a little bit of metal, so not very heavy. That said, unlike NEXs of old, you get more professional style controls on this, and it has a slightly more professional look to it. It doesn't look as kind of, well, unique as the NEX system did. Things like the dials back here we get, thank goodness, our standard PASM, intelligent auto, and everything else kind of control. A secondary dial over here for controlling stuff on the menu system. The menu system also uses the Sony Alpha style. Gone is the old NEX kind of point and shoot oriented icon based thing that I never really loved, but maybe somebody out there did. I don't know. Pretty much everybody's always complained about it. We got the pop-up flash over here as well. Sony's active hot shoe on top. A whole lot of customizable buttons going on over here. The usual dial rotary wheel over here with clicky tilty thing. FN to bring up quick settings on it. Your playback, your programmables. Another customizable up here, and obviously this is your shutter button and the on-off. And notice that there's a decent grip on here. And this guy is mostly a metal body with a nice textured grip on. So it looks like a pretty nice camera. It's trying to compete with Olympus's Micro Four Thirds and some Panasonics, that kind of thing. So it's a quality piece. But the price isn't that bad. $649 for the body only. That's the same price as the outgoing NEX6 was. And honestly, you're getting a higher megapixel rating here. You're getting actually a new sensor altogether. You're getting the new Bions X processor on here. So there's a lot to recommend this over the outgoing NEX6. The NEX7 is also going away. Sony wants people, I think, to move into the Alpha 7 that we also review, which is a full frame, a lot more expensive though. But honestly, given the new sensor on here, the very good Bions processor, I personally would pick this over the NEX7 if you find one still in a store somewhere. And to show the evolution of the NEX line, now I have the funny little accessory flash that came in the box. Here's the original NEX5. Looks more like a hybridized point and shoot, doesn't it? Notice there's no viewfinder on here anywhere. You got the LCD on the back, and then that's that. This guy, one of the things that adds over the A5000 is the OLED viewfinder. Something that Sony really excels at. We've liked that a lot on their RX10, on their A7, and again here. And that's a 1.4 million dot viewfinder. Yes, that resolution actually does go down a bit from the NEX6, NEX7, but you know what, it still looks pretty good. So I know some people are saying, how could Sony ever downgrade a spec on this? Well, considering that they're keeping the price at $649 and everything else got so much better, I think it's okay. Now, I'm going to continue to provide some specs, but you know how it is with cameras, especially if you're camera enthusiast types, there's myriad specs. You can visit Sony's website and get all those. I'm going to describe the experience of using the camera, how well it does, and some of the key specs without getting extra super geeky and giving you what you could actually read yourself on a website. So here's what our display looks like. This is a 3-inch LCD that actually has an outdoor brightness mode that's pretty good and functional. We have 90-degree tilt in this direction. And then we have 45-degree down. We do not have sideways. We do not have the flip it and drop it down beneath the body like some bigger Sony Alpha digital SLRs have. This one is 921,000 dots. Again, it's 3 inches, so that's about the equivalent of 800 by 600. Now, right now it's in Intelligent Auto Plus mode, so say we put it in something like Program where you can actually control some more things. We have a little screen that gives you a hint on what those things do. You can turn off that little hint screen if you want. So say we hit the function button right now. Here we have quick access to things like white balance or flash control, all sorts of handy things. So that's pretty darn useful. Now, if you're shooting in something like Intelligent Auto, it's going to set all of that stuff for you. You can choose your creative style. You get the idea right there. And if we hit the menu button to see what the menus look like, there you go. Standard alpha menus. Any of you who've used a Sony Alpha Digital SLR will find these familiar. So gone are the little icons that you have to click on an icon and then explore and try to find where your settings are. I think this is much more straightforward. Obviously, as you can see here on the screen, you can shoot in JPEG in various qualities. You can shoot in RAW in JPEG, which I always recommend, even though this has quite a good JPEG engine on camera. I haven't always said that about Sony cameras, but this one actually really brings out the colors, brings out the contrast. It does still like to over-sharpen, so sometimes your grasp can be a little bit dizzying, but overall, I think it does a good job. Anyway, Sony's usual aspect ratio 3:2 right there, which is a little different from the usual 4:3 that you'll see on other cameras. And you can shoot in AVC HD video, which is, most common. And for AVC HD, you can see all the options that we have here. So pretty healthy, all the way up to 24 megabit per second for 60i, 28 if you go up to 60p, and then you've got 24p. Obviously, if you're in a different country where you have 50i and 50p instead, you'll just see 50i and 50p instead of 60. Now, one of the benefits of this camera compared to other compact cameras and even SLRs is the fact that it's a mirrorless camera. What does that mean? It means no pentaprism, no difficulty with pulling focus. It can do continuous autofocus. And Sony has done a lot of improvement with their continuous autofocus for shooting still shots, too. You can do up to 11 frames continuous shot. And now we have continuous autofocus. There's no more of that, put it in that funny priority mode that they used to have, and it really initially focuses in the first shot and then uses that same focus for all of them. Now it really does continually autofocus. Likewise with video, they have always done a good job, and this is a fantastic video camera. Sony's pretty good at making dual-purpose cameras where really both functions are almost equally important, I would say, to the design. So you've got continuous autofocus here. You don't have to pull your own focus. It doesn't hunt. It doesn't go, all the time fiddling with the focus on it. Really sharp 1080p. It's quite good, and we're going to splice in some footage so you can see how it does, including some challenging shots of some ducks on the water. Between the splashing of the water, which usually would create artifacting, and the movement, you get an idea. Really good for video. And speaking of video, as with Sony cameras, there's always a little red button to press. They have made it harder to press. I don't know if people accidentally were triggering it before, but it's kind of a little bit off angle over here, and you got to work a little hard to press it because it's kind of no longer sticking out anymore. You can shoot in any of the modes that you want, or you can actually put it in movie mode if you want, and then you can change all of your settings, your aperture, your shutter, that kind of thing. Now, when you're doing something like shooting video, you probably want to use a continuous aperture lens if you can. Obviously, the kit lens is a budget lens. That means the aperture varies depending on where you're zooming. See how it says 3.5 to 5.6 for your aperture? The aperture will change. 3.5 when it's at the wide angle, go up to 5.6 at telephoto. So for those of you who are not photo pros, that's how that works. So that means your exposure is changing. You might want to make adjustments when you're shooting video, and that's kind of not always the cool thing to do, right? So there are other lenses, obviously, that Sony makes. When the NEX first came out, it was a lens-poor device. That's not the case anymore. They have about 15 lenses or so that are E-mount lenses, and this uses Sony's E-mount lens. You can also use the new FE, full-frame E-mount lenses if you want. It's going to change the focal length even more. Talk about that a little bit later, too. But anyway, this is their step-up lens right here, and this is not too huge a lens. This is obviously constant aperture f4, 16 to 70 millimeters. So this is kind of equivalent to that Canon L f4 lens that I showed you, because if you do the conversion, this is an APS-C sensor, so that means 1.5 is the multiplication factor to get to your usual full frame or 35 millimeter measurement. This equals your 24 to 105 zoom lens. This is a Zeiss lens. It's got some nice metal in it. The quality feels good on it. And I know, it's a funny thing. There has been so much talk about this lens, whether it's worth the money, whether it's crap, whether it's any good. And honestly, going from the kit lens, and this is better than the average kit lens, wow, colors and contrast, noticeably better. And that is honestly the important thing. I know you guys obsess on MTF numbers and the resolution, how sharp it is, how many pixels, looking at things 1:1. I mean, nobody looks at things 1:1 anymore. These things are way higher resolution than even 4K monitors when they shoot pictures. Don't do that, really. If it looks really sharp to your eye, that's probably less to do with the resolution and resolving power of the lens than the contrast that it's bringing, because contrast makes things look sharper. All of these lenses, even the kit lenses, are pretty darn sharp, and you can shoot really big enlargements and still have sharpness, so just keep that in mind. Anyway, really sharp after all that's said and done, especially in the center. Yes, the corners can get a little soft. Yes, there is some distortion. More and more with these cameras, digital cameras, we're seeing lenses that have compensation in the bodies for those things. And if you're shooting in JPEG, you won't see any distortion. It fixes that problem. It'll sharpen up the corners a bit, and also Adobe, Photoshop, Lightroom, those kind of things, they all have lens corrections for those issues. But yes, there is some distortion as you go to very wide angle or even to telephoto, and a little softness in the corners, but honest to God, unless you're looking at this 1:1, 100% enlargement, you're not going to be able to tell. So that's the lens, because I know there's been a lot of talk about that, and a lot of you are wondering if it's really worth it. I say it is. Now our kit lens here, it's pretty cool actually. You know, you can get this body only. If you don't have this lens, and this lens has been bundled with some other NEXs, it's a good walk-around lens, the 16-50, which would convert up to a 3x zoom, starting at 24mm and going out to about 75 or so. That's a pretty useful set of focal lengths, and it may not be the sharpest, it may not be the most contrasty and colorful, but it's actually surprisingly decent, especially if you're shooting around f8 or so. So I would recommend it if you don't have it already, because it makes the camera this small and this portable, and that's just darn crazy. And it is a motorized zoom, so I can use this lever if I want, or I can use the zoom ring, especially if I turn the camera on again. And there it is. So you can see that goes in and goes out. So you can use this to zoom, or you can use this. The point of the powered zoom is it's nice for video. It's quiet and it's smooth. Now, some places, like I think B&H is doing this. I know Best Buy is offering another bundle where you get the kit zoom lens here, which is actually in the box. It's the standard Sony kit. This is the ILC6000 camera. If it's a 6000L, it means there's a lens bundled inside the box. But they're also bundling this at a really attractive price, and you can see right here, this is the 55 to 210. Now this is your equivalent to basically a kit zoom, and you can see this, the aperture of 4.5 to 6.3, which is about normal standard apertures that you're going to find on a kit lens. It too is actually not bad at all. The contrast and colors are pretty decent on it for a relatively speaking affordable lens. As you can see, it has image stabilization, optical steady shot on this, important for a long zoom. It's not too heavy. It doesn't feel cheesy either. It's not too long. Does pop out if you're going out to 210, but I've used it to capture some birds and some squirrels and things like that. And honestly, for the price, if you're getting this bundle, you might find it for like $150 additional, even some crazier sales. I say go for it if you're the kind of person that is a bird shooter. You need that kind of distance. Now, Sony claims this is the world's fastest focusing camera. Is that true? Well, I don't know, but it's pretty darn fast. So here we're going to take a picture of the lens. We're going to focus on something really close, which is the lens cap that's right over here, which you can do at wide angle. Yes, it's a fast focusing camera. 179 point autofocus, that's 179 point of phase detection. And what's important, the coverage is improved to 92% of the viewing area. It used to be 50% on our older NEXs, so more points where it can actually use the phase detection autofocus, and it has 24 point traditional contrast detection also. So yes, it's fast. Again, you got continuous shooting on here as well. So it's a quick camera, and there's no lens hunting, which is nice too. I've had some older Sony Alphas and even some of my Canon not so great lenses, and boy, you can get some serious hunting going on. Even in low light, this is a pretty good focuser. It has that amber focus assist light, and I always find that turning that off on Sony cameras makes for better autofocusing. Go figure. As you can see here, it has Wi-Fi. It also has NFC, that's single band 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. You can use that for image transfer. You can also use Sony's iOS and Android apps if you want to do some remote control of photo shooting, not video, but photo. As is labeled here, we have our micro HDMI, and we have a multi-connector, AV connector, combo USB 2.0. This can output clean HDMI up to 4K photo output if you want to do it to a 4K TV, obviously. So that's pretty neat and a pretty professional feature. Sony's been doing that a lot.